Rinzai Roku, sayings and doings of Rinzai. True sincerity is extremely difficult to attain, and the Buddha Dharma is deep and mysterious. I explain it all day long, but you monks pay no attention. Though you tread it underfoot 1,000, nay, 10,000 times a day, you remain in utter darkness. It is without a vestige of form, yet distinct in its solitary shining. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's been a while since I've had the privilege of attending session here at Hoen-ji. Other responsibilities have been the focus of my practice. And while I have not been here physically, my heart and mind have had all of you. Close within me. And without the Sangha, I really don't know if I could have done what I was doing. As some of you know, just very recently, 2-ish weeks ago, I said goodbye to my first teacher, without whom I really don't know what would have become of me. She set me on this path, or maybe a better way to say it, she gave her blessing to this path. When one is ordained, even lay ordained, as is my case, one selects a spiritual advisor. Someone who knows when to crack the whip, someone who knows when to console, when to be silent, when to speak. And I chose her to be my spiritual advisor because I was pretty sure that she could cut through any and all bullshit that I was inevitably bound to throw up in front of myself. We used to read Rinzai together, or more accurately, I would read it, she would listen to it, and every now, listen to me reading, and every now and then would, so he says. And so while she encouraged and supported me to do my very best, she nonetheless prevented me from becoming enamored with practice, enamored with various teachers. Helped me to see as much as I could see, rather than roll around in it like a dog might. And so today's talk in every respect is also her talk. And so I picked this passage out of Rinzai because it is my favorite passage. I have read my copy to the point where it just about has to be rebound. And there's so much annotations in the text and around the corners and edges that it's kind of hard to make out the original text. And of course, everything that is said therein, or reported, is precious. Yet, as human beings, we nonetheless have our preferences, our attachments. One time in Doksan with Edo Roshi, we got to talking. I can't quite remember the context, but we always had a very lively exchange. I think he enjoyed playing games with a psychologist. I was the dog and he was the one with the little tidbit here. But we got to talking about attachments. And he said to me, he said, "Do you think I have attachments?" I laughed out loud. I said, "Of course you have attachments." He looked and he said, "Can't be helped." And so this selection out of Rinzai is one to which I am thoroughly attached. For me, it seems to cover the whole range of the Dharma teaching, or the Buddha's message. Starts out talking about a human condition, sincerity. Talks about the struggles of a teacher, constantly trying to help us forward. Talks about the student, who works as hard as possible to be as blind as possible. And finally ends up with a succinct and complete statement about it. And so it covers the full range of the human experience through the mysterious Dharma. I have spoken about sincerity on several occasions, and I imagine there are those here who remember sincerity, but for the sake of those who may not, I will try to give a brief. Roshi promised me a Kleenex box. Sincerity comes from the Old Latin, sincere, meaning sin without, and cere or charity, depending upon your school of pronunciation, means wax. And in the olden days, that say the days of sculpture, the days of the amphitheater, the days of the Roman Empire, there was a great flourishing in statuary, sculpture. And of course, you didn't want to spend your whole lot of money and all your time putting together some statue of whatever, only to find in the final moment that an arm dropped off. Better yet, a head fell off. Because there was some sort of a crack or inconsistency or fault in the basic block of stone. And so sculptors would go to the various quarries and they would find cracks, and that wasn't good for business from the quarrying standpoint. So what they started doing is rubbing wax in all the cracks and being very good at it, matching colors and everything, so that when you looked at it, it looked to be monolithically connected. And so you turn thud off the earth. And so after a fair amount of bitching and moaning, the Roman government would send inspectors out to the quarries, and they would look for cracks in stones for sale. And if they found any wax, that block would be rejected, or probably the person trying to sell it would have a close encounter with a lion in the amphitheater, Colosseum. And so when the inspector found a block of stone that was through and through, he would stamp it with an official seal of whatever kind they would use, and the stamp said sincere, that is to say, without wax. And as that rolls along, it eventually becomes sincere. And when we talk about sincerity, what we mean is somebody is wholly and completely with it. They're not got their fingers crossed behind their back. And so Rinzai starts out by saying, sincerity, true sincerity, not false sincerity, not sincerity because there's some wax rubbed in it someplace, but from the toes to the head, in the arm, one solid, And I've read Rinzai, as I've said many, many times, and allowing for my bias, I'm pretty sure that this is the only place in the whole book where he touches something that I might call psychological, or human nature, or kind of and when he does so, he picks this quality of sincerity. And what he means here is that as we practice, we can't practice with our fingers crossed behind us. Well, I'm really sincere during session, but once I get home, I'll get back into my usual routine. Or I'll really hit it when I'm on the cushion. I'm a really professional sitter. I can sit here and work on columns or work on Dharma or whatever it is I'm doing, follow my breath, and I'm right with it. But as soon as the bell is rung, then it's, get up, walk around, sort of like boxing in the sense that you have rounds, and after a round, you go to the corner, you sit down. The guy rubs your face, and tells you a joke or two, and how's it going? Oh, it's really going well. Look like shit to me. Then the bell rings, and you're back out there. What Rinzai is calling for is a complete effort. And I think he's not talking about this kind of complete effort. Rather, he's talking about this kind of complete effort. Well, this too. Such that if you really are interested in the Dharma, then you will seek it, walk with it, laugh with it, cry with it, throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, throughout a lifetime. So that yes, this atmosphere facilitates a sincere effort. But once we go that way, and for most of us, we're back home, we're back working, maybe with kids, certainly with a credit card to balance, a car to take to the dealer, a lawn that needs mowing, a drippy faucet, crying children. In all those circumstances of life, that's where you practice. And that's where this garden, bears its fruit. So that when you're lucky enough to attend session, your karma lines up, and you get here and you start going through all the various routines, following the schedule, doing your work. You have a sense that this is really no different from what you've been doing day by day. And conversely, when you're out there, you find, lo and behold, that's no different from being in the Zendo at session. We practice Zen, and every now and then we take a walk, Kingi, as I've demonstrated several times this weekend how to walk. And don't follow my tradition. And, people ask you, well, what's the walking around about? And, you generally, if they're just newcomers or casual questioners, you say, well, you can only sit so long before the body gets kind of cramped and dysfunctional or whatnot. So you get up, you walk around, give your body a break, and then sit back down. And the questioner usually says, yeah, that makes sense. Well, closer to the bone, he teaches us that there's no difference between sitting and walking, between walking and sitting. So that when you sit and the Jitsu rings the bell to start the sitting, it's almost a distraction because you've never stopped. So Roshi used to say about Kingi, put your soul on the soles of your feet. And so we work at being sincere, that our practice is through and through, that we don't segregate it into segments. But what we're doing here is what we're doing there, and what we're doing now is what we do then. And in some fundamental way, how we do it now is how we do it there and then. There's a slight difference in form. Running after a 3-year-old is not exactly like Zazen. But on the other hand, it's just like Zazen. The 3-year-old was usually a little bit faster. And finding that spot within. That spot is usually a little bit faster than we are. The Buddha Dharma is deep and mysterious. Deep and mysterious. Deep, suggesting lots of effort, and you're going to have to go a while to get there. And when you do, all that you're going to find is mystery. Because the Dharma can never be exhausted. The tail never gets through the window. There's always something. That eludes us. Hoen said in his, it's one of my favorite sayings, Hoen said in his later days, his later days, he had insights into the Dharma which showed the error of all his previous understandings. And I think we can safely say that his previous understandings were pretty good. There's always this element of mystery. And that's why we talk about entering the stream or the path and the way, the Tao, and never the destination. Because while we may stop at various roadside attractions on the way, we never arrive at the final destination. He goes on to say, have a drink of water, let people relax. I gave a talk once and I held the water in my hand all the time, which meant you can move anytime. I explain it exhaustively all day long, but you monks pay not the slightest bit of attention. I explain it all day long. These two monks are sitting here someplace and, and they're bejabbering about whatever, and one of them says, oh my God, here comes the old man, let's hide. Yesterday he got me and he pinned me against the wall for an hour talking about this stuff. And that's not what it means. It means that the way he lives, the way he sips tea, the way he talks at a meeting, the priorities that he sets for himself and for the Sangha. How he gets mad, how she gets mad. I'm not trying to be too sexist here. How she gets mad and how she gets happy. And how she expresses this. All of these are teishos. There's a tradition amongst Catholic nuns that if, for whatever reason, the order of the nun, in other words, the traditions, the rules, the do's and the don'ts and whatnot of this particular order of nuns, if that were to get lost, all they would have to do is watch that nun, follow her through the day. And by her practice, she would tell you what the order and tradition was. And so you could write the order again. Order in the sense of how things are ordered. You could write it again just by noting her activity. And so we understand that this is what a teacher is. Someone who teaches us how to wake up, how to go to sleep, and what to do in the myriad of activities that come between the two. And every now and then, because students tend to be a little bit dense, they don't pay attention, every now and then the teacher makes a sacrifice to sit down and formally present. This is not because such a formal presentation is closer to the truth, clearer about the truth, but rather because, unfortunately, we students generally don't pay attention unless there's some gussied up version of it. Presentation, a talk, presentation, a seminar, Nobel Prize speech. And then we kind of wake ourselves up for a few moments. We're, oh, yeah, that's good, man. Yeah, I'll take some of that. And then as soon as the presentation is over, back to the old routines. So he's teaching moment by moment. And you can find out what the Dharma is about if you just pay attention, moment by moment. And of course, we're lucky enough to have a formal teacher whose patience and kindness is quite remarkable. And in addition to this formal teacher, we have as many teachers as there are pieces of wood in this floor. As many teachers as there are leaves in a tree, or little spores on the end of a dandelion. It's a definition of maturity, by the way. A young person that is full of wonder. An old person, puts down weed suppressant. Get rid of it. And so, even though we treaded 1,000, 10,000, a million, 4 trillion, 377 billion times a day, and so forth and so on, we do it like this. Where the hell is it? Maybe this is the wrong color. I should work on a better color. This is really stamped with my name on it. Or maybe I need a different teacher. Or maybe a different practice. Or different parents. I'll go to psychoanalysis for a while. See if we can iron out some of these wrinkles. Because we forget. We haven't woken up to the fact that the wrinkles is what it's all about. So Ada Roshi says, he asks me, You're a psychologist, you know about these things. You've been around a while. I think I had been layer dating by that time. Do you think I have attachments? Of course not. You're Japanese Zen master. American Zen masters may have attachments, but certainly not Japanese Zen. You think I have attachments? Do you think I have failings? You think I miss the mark frequently? Hard. Unheard. But fortunately, we had a kind of relationship where we enjoyed antagonizing each other in a helpful way. So at that moment I laughed. I said, of course you got attachments. Give me a break. Can't be helped. Wrinkles can't be avoided. Just pay attention. The Diamond Sutra. We heard today that this is everywhere. Not differentiation nor degree. It is rightly attained by doing all that is good, avoiding all that is evil. Doesn't sound any different from any other religion so far. Purify the heart. This heart purification. The heart of your sincerity. Pay attention. Once gave a talk down at DBC, and I was, I think, I don't know, maybe it was this particular passage, because it's about the only one that seems to bubble up when I talk. I think it was the first time I'd ever given a talk down at Dharma, and instead of sitting in this position, I was like sitting over here, talking this way, cross purposes to the Dharma. And Ada Roshi was sitting over here under one of the pictures, and I used this expression, pay attention, and I turned to him and I said, how do you say that in Japanese? Or what is the Japanese version of that? And he looks at me and he says, we don't pay. So, Nikyu was a Japanese student, teacher, died in 1481 at 87 years old, where he was the abbot at Daitoku-ji. And once you learn anything about Nikyu, you find him being the abbot of anything is really hardly believable. But a rich man made a lot of money, went a long distance back before the bullet train. He said, Master Nikyu, would you please write me some words of wisdom? And this was an appropriate request because Ikkyu is right at the beginning, the font of what we think of as expressive calligraphy for the Japanese. Some people will say he's the father, mother, sponsor, source of the calligraphy tradition versus just writing communications. So, maybe he was already set up, but he took out his brush and he wrote this character. And the rich man looks at it and he says, attention. Is that all you got to say about that? Says, can you expand on that a little bit? So if you, big piece of paper. Attention. That's what you did the first time. Well, let's get with it. I spent a lot of money for this. So Ikkyu takes notice. For the third time, writes the character. Attention. At which point his visitor loses all sense of propriety. He said, well, what the hell does that mean anyway? And then Nikyu responds, attention simply means attention. We frequently encounter this in terms of mindfulness. We might tell kids, pay attention. If you're as old as I am and as young as Roshi is, you remember back in grade school where the teacher would say, put your feet flat on the floor, fold your hands on the desk and pay attention. And then would take a stick and start pointing at things on the blackboard. This, of course, if you're in on the know, this is a good hypnotic induction. Put your feet on the floor. Hold your hands on the desk. Mobilize your body. Focus your eyes on one point. Got it. A, B, Z, Q, M, R. Pay attention. We normally encounter this as mindfulness, but mindfulness has been sort of co-opted by the 21st century age. And that's why in the Meal Sutras, Roshi changed this. He used to say, I still say it when I'm sort of on that. What is most important is the practice of mindfulness, which helps us transcend greed, anger, and foolishness. Mindfulness for us, for these days, is a little bit too flabby. Attention. Cuts through. Doesn't massage your way through. Cuts through. You look up the word in the dictionary, you find that attention means two parts. It's A, which is a contraction, and then tendere. And it means, very interestingly, to lean forward, to lean into, so that your whole body. There was this book, I think, written by the lady who was chairman of the board out at Hewlett-Packard, I think written primarily for women in the business world, but anybody. And the title of the book was Lean In. Think, lean in. Lean in. Don't settle back. You know, as a psychotherapist, people would often say that they were practicing meditation. That always caught me every time. I say, how do you meditate? I says, well, you know, I get in the soft chair and I put it in a reclining position and I turn the lights down. I put on some soft music and maybe light some potpourri over there and meditate. It's wonderful. I advise it for everybody. I couldn't agree more. I think that kind of relaxation everybody ought to do every now and then per day. But meditation, as far as we're concerned, does not come out of a need to relax. Aeschylus was a Greek poet. I think he also did some plays, but I'm not up on that. But this was Sandra's favorite poem out of the myriads of poems that have been written in myriads of languages over myriads of years. This is the one that she made her own. Aeschylus. He who learns must suffer. And even in our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart. And in our despair, against our will, comes wisdom to us by the awful grace of God. Leaving aside gods and the God, capital G, lower G, whatever, wisdom comes to us against our will. We may say we're here at Sesshin, or we may say we're here sitting. But when we look deeply, we find there's a part that sort of sits off on the edge and says, when are we going to get out of here? When is he going to have a drink of water? First time I went to Sesshin was down at DBZ, before the monastery was completed. And Sesshin was held down in the 19th century house, Jorakuan. It's a neat name. And it was a 7-day session. Started Saturday night to Saturday night. I lasted through about Wednesday. From Wednesday on, I was designing model train layout and, trying to figure out a budget and doing sundry things all the while. I'm doing zazen. Inside, I'm thinking, oh my God, how did I get myself into this? Some other things about Thursday night, which are a different subject. Simone Weil, she died in 1943, I think of tuberculosis in France. And she was educated. She was a socialist labor organizer, probably a communist of sorts, an author. And interestingly enough, as she aged through her short life, she became more and more involved in her sense of mysticism. And at one point she writes, "Attention is the only faculty of the mind that allows us access to God." Once again, we don't have to worry about what we mean by God. We could just as accurately say, attention is the only faculty of the mind that allows us access to it. It. What is it? Pleasant fall afternoon. So in the practice of attention, which I believe in, I'd say I know, the practice of attention, the foundation of practicing. But everyone is a little bit different. My way of paying attention is not your way of paying attention. Doesn't necessarily feel the same inside, may not manifest the same way outside. A person who's an artist, a person who's a sculptor, and a person designing PC boards, they're all paying attention, but they are obviously doing different things. So to follow your own path. Quite a few years ago now, Roshi would know more exactly. I think it was for Roshi's 60th birthday that encomium was done. 60th? 60. And various people were asked to write a contribution. Thank you, and so forth and so on. And Roshi asked me if I would write something, which was, both surprising and an honor, considering my in-again, out-again relationship at DBZ and with Edo Roshi. But I wrote something that ended up being quite long. It was about 4 or 5 pages long, where everybody else had written a paragraph, maybe a long paragraph, but 2 pages if it was double-spaced. And I wrote this thing that was a good 5 or so pages long, and it was single-spaced. But what it was a record, testimony, report of various encounters with Edo Roshi during Dokusan. And you're kind of hard pressed to find out or to read or research or get any material about what does the teacher actually do during Dokusan? Guides the student, highly signs guide that. What does he or she actually do, say, not say? So I picked out about 10 or so encounters that I had with Edo Roshi, and this is one of them. And I would write about it. Contrary to rumor, session does eventually end. The hour finally comes for the last sitting and the closing ceremony. Then, at the sound of the final bell, all rise and leave the zendo. Happy voices and laughter soon replace silence as smiling faces line the monastery hallway. During the closing ceremony, Edo Roshi stands and offers his remarks. Do not be deceived by the practice of others. Follow your own path, straight ahead. His call to self-truth rings once, echoes endlessly. Certainly do not be deceived. Good advice for all. But what about the phrase, by the practice of others? Roshi's practice. Senior students' practice. No one wishes to be deceived by error, but the authentic practice and example of others must surely be helpful. No! Roshi's words cut through the hopeless hope that the path of others can somehow substitute for one's own path. Only by dropping everything can one drop anything. Everything dropping away. Follow your own path, straight ahead. Everyone has their own path. Their secret source of action. Even as it curves along beside the stream of life, the path is always straight ahead. An old passage comes to mind. Though I walk through the valley of death, I fear no evil. The bell rings. The last sitting is over. One size does not fit all. Always got a kick down at here too, but at the DVC, session would start out and you'd have one cushion on every spot. And out in the foyer, there'd be this mound of cushions, 20 feet long. What the heck? By the 5th or 6th day of session, there are no longer any cushions out in the foyer, and every spot has got its own architectural wonder. This one is soft here, art here, sport here. When I was younger, going to session back in my 30s. I can remember for a few sessions I sat on this small piece of cloth. It had about half an inch padding in it. It was about this big. And I folded it over one. And what I can sit on. Now I'm sitting in a chair for the most part. It's contrary to popular belief. If we're lucky, we all get old. If we're lucky, we learn how to suffer creatively. So in closing, I would be remiss if I didn't report what my life teacher practiced. We met each other when I was 18 and she was 15. We met at a swimming pool. I was a lifeguard. She was a bathing suit. But interestingly enough, the intimacy that we enjoyed the most was dancing. So from early on, she said that if she could apply for a job or if she could be something, there were two things that she always mentioned. One was, I'd like to be funny. And not like Joe Rivers, funny, but full of a warmth about life. A readiness and an ability to find the chuckle in any situation. And she did that quite beautifully. And she was always a good addition to a party without monopolizing it. The second thing that she wanted to be the last fairy. The last fairy. So that as a situation develops, rolls along, expands, contracts, succeeds or fails, anyway, all sorts of influences are involved. People, situations, weather, stock market, fill in the blank. Frequently people would be agitated with each other. And she saw the last fairy as coming in and as much as possible soothing the situation, settling the situation, reconciling the situation. In our younger years, we never went to a party or a social gathering that, as we got ready to leave and whatnot, party breaking up or what have you, she would always go to the sponsor, the host, the hostess, whatever, and ask if there was any help we could provide cleaning up. Always. She was always quick, ready, and able to find some perspective that would help people get it together. She could always find a path forward for whatever, for whoever. And not because she was some sort of a Pollyanna, goody two-shoes. She saw things with a surgical accuracy. I was the trained psychologist. I was the one meeting with people. I was the one listening and advising. And yet she had more insight than I could ever manage to bring together. Insofar as I would discuss a case with her without breaking confidentiality and anonymity, someone who, then I would express my confusion about whatever. She would find the way forward. I checked with my kids recently, the last couple of days, knowing I was going to talk here because there was something I wanted to say about her. And so it's true. I mean, kids have different perspective, different experience, their parents. They both agreed that was the kindest person they had ever met. And since her death, various people have called me up or made contact with me with some variation. I would remember when I was really going through hell with something, and Sandra was so kind that I made it through. Sandra taught me the meaning of kindness. I always had doubts about looking for the best part of things until I met Sandra. And I saw that kindness really worked. And this, of course, is close relative, if not first-class relative, of compassion. Kindness is an expression of compassion. Kindness works. If it doesn't work right now, maybe tomorrow. If it doesn't work in a situation by tomorrow, perhaps the day after. If after weeks, months, and years it still seems to be a horrible situation, she would say, just not yet, not yet. And I tried to emulate her as best I could, but as Ada Roshi says, you got to follow your own path. And my path at best was to emulate kindness while she lived it. And so with her teaching me compassion by way of kindness, and with the cushion teaching me attention I arrive at this spot. And all of us at one point or another, whatever the circumstances, time, place, event, at some point we will find ourselves trying to find the spot, the way forward, the answer, the solution to something that befuddles us. And what I have to say for all of us in those spots is to pay attention, be kind.